Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jim Patterson with EPM Live, and today's webinar is the first in a series of 4 PPM Challenges and Opportunities. The Gartner Group recently at their IT Expo had identified through the Project and Portfolio Management segment that there are in 2012's current PPM challenges and opportunities that can be acknowledged and addressed by organizations using technology and process and methodology. And today we're going to focus on the first one, which is prioritizing demand. From a PPM challenges perspective, the challenges really continue to be that there are increasing demands on organizations to accomplish more than their technology, budgets, and resources can handle. More things are coming in than we have the ability to deliver on. Hence, it becomes more and more important that prioritizing demand is done. But prioritizing demand is not an easy task when there are many factors to consider and many dimensions on these requests that are coming in. For example, are these things aligning with and correlate with the strategic objectives and missions that we have in our organization? Do they provide the proper amount and level of benefits to the organization for us to invest our time, effort, and dollars in? Cost constraints. There are only so many dollars to go around in budgets. Are the things that we're being asked to do fit within our ability to pay for those things with the budgets that we've been given? Resource limitations. Resources can be very finite commodities, human and other resources. And the portfolio that we work and projects that we choose to embark upon can be limited very much by that constraint. There's also things like risk factors and many others that you can actually put into your models to actually determine how you want to prioritize the demand that's coming into your organization. From an opportunity perspective, given those challenges, there are proven tools and techniques that can be used to prioritize your portfolio and the demand that's coming in. We don't always just have to say yes to everything. There are consistent methods for valuing and scoring projects in other words, so that we can actually evaluate them in very objective ways against one another to come up with the highest value, highest return, and most beneficial pieces of work that are being requested of us. There's also measurable considerations of the environmental factors that play a role in affecting the outcome. Things that are maybe not numeric driven, but other things that are maybe cultural, market-driven, etc. The idea here is that we want to plan the most profitable portfolio for the organization, and if we use the right methods and metrics to do that, we can make a profitable portfolio to meet all the strategic goals of the organization. The next kind of logical step in that is that if you manage and select a profitable portfolio, this in turn should lead to a profitable business for you. So if we look at PPM, Project Portfolio Management, all the way through EPM, Enterprise Project Management, which is more of the execution side of things, we're going to focus on the top part of this if you look at this from the beginning from a top-down approach. The demand management piece is really the capture, the ideas, the requests, the demand that's coming in for strategic objectives, projects, and other operational work. And these items very often in a lot of organizations come in very rapidly and come in at a volume that is much greater than we could ever tackle in any one given time period. So the demand management piece is really the intake of what the organization and others and our customers may want us to do in an organization, and we have to find a way to figure out what are the things we can deliver on and what are the right things for us to deliver on from that perspective. The things that we capture and the information we capture through that demand process is really going to have a bearing on our portfolio management, meaning as we have values and we have rankings and we have different priorities for our requests, we can then make intelligent selection so that we can make sure that we're working on the most opportune, most advantageous, most beneficial things for the organization. And out of that funnel then will come work of various types. Some of it could be project in nature, some of it could be more operational in nature. But the key is that we should be working on the right things and also the things that are within the constraints of our ability to deliver dollars and resources to those. One of the net benefits of actually having a good selection process and prioritization process is that it actually, as a byproduct, can actually help our execution by not actually overloading and giving us unreasonable workloads to actually deliver on and not sacrifice on timetables or quality, etc. So today we're going to focus on the top pieces of this, on the PPM strategic project portfolio management. So let's start with demand management. Demand management allows organizations to gain visibility into all project and work demand across the business. And the idea is we want to put that in context of everything else that's going on, our business process, the governance that we've put in place, and make sure that we're working on the right things that align with our business strategies. One thing we want to do to be able to make that happen is we really want to centralize this process. We want to centralize demand capture. So we want to capture all project and work requests, hopefully in a common repository, common solution, so we can capture all ideas, requests, and proposals in one place so that we can get a clean look at the demand across the organization. All of the work demand should be captured centrally, even if it's potentially different types of work. If there's variances in the nature of the work, who the work's being done for, the size and scope of the work, we should capture it all in one place so that we can make valuations and really manage it as an entity. If we do that, we can actually achieve good demand visibility. So demand can take many forms. It could be large investment projects, large capital projects. It could be simple, quick-hitting project requests. It could be large multi-project programs that come in. But in essence, typically they're all vying for the same resources. So meaning as we make our valuations, we really got to determine trade-offs and consider these things in relation to one another. So with visibility into all this demand, we can classify, evaluate, and properly prioritize and score the work so that we can allocate the resources to the highest value opportunities. And when we constantly evaluate this in a cyclical way, we want to look at new intake and new requests and new proposals that are coming in and actually even evaluate those against the in-flight or already active projects to see if there's things coming down the pike that are of higher priority that may bump or cause us to suspend other projects to take higher priority projects into the fold. One way to get consistency in this is to really be consistent in the way and the metrics that you capture and the data you capture around defining these projects and their work. What you really want to do is have a mechanism or a system that is going to allow you to be consistent in that. So you want to be able to have consistent forms and data points so that you can capture things like key business drivers that matter most to the business. Having pre-built templates that highlight those and call for information in those areas is one way to make that to happen. And we should make that happen for all types of work requests. Even if you have different types of work requests, you may have different levels of rigor, different levels of complexity on these intake forms, depending on the nature and the complexity of the work. But they should be consistent across the board to at least some degree. Standardizing the data and capture and enforcing consistency is really going to give us the ability to objectively measure and compare and contrast different requests and different proposals that come before us. You can actually ensure the strategic alignment and making sure that they are meeting the goals and stated goals of our business and also contributing to the bottom line by capturing such data as the benefits that we're expecting, the return on investment, the internal rates of return, things like that. So we want to be consistent. Now there's no one right way, depending on the nature of your business to do this, and the metrics can vary from organization to organization, but the consistency of that and objective measures rather than leaving it up to political considerations and other things that may be going on in the organization will help deliver a better and more fruitful and more profitable portfolio. Another thing about having a central repository of a solution for this type of intake and demand is that we can implement automated workflow and stage gating. So as we bring in ideas, for example, an idea may be classified as such or simply as a request. And we want to then promote it as appropriate through different approvals and vetting of that idea to see if it can gain momentum and actually hold its own and justify itself as something that should be put into our active project mix. So if we streamline the project and work request by leveraging things like automated workflow and stage gating and having automated approvals through those different stages, it's a great efficiency enhancer and can actually help go through a very structured process to making sure that we're doing things in a best practices way. For example, you may have things that come in as strictly as ideas or requests that do nothing more at that point than just get it on the radar to be initially vetted to see if it's even worth investigating even further. You might have something approved through a workflow stage there that helps you decide that, yeah, we're willing to invest some time and resource in investigating this further and building business case and using subject matter expertise in order to kind of vet that out a little further. Those proposed projects then may get into some approved stage where it looks like this is a good candidate for us to take on as an active project. But then it has to go before some type of approval, whether it be a governance board or a steering committee, et cetera, or an executive team, to take that good approved candidate and actually put it into the active mix. So those are some typical ways that these things happen. But if we can promote these things in an automated fashion through a central demand portal, those things will actually help the process and ensure that we're working on the right things under the right criteria. From a stage gate perspective, as we start using forms and such to capture this information, you may actually go through different stages through the evolution of a request on its way to potentially becoming an active project. For example, from a stage gate perspective, you may have different stages in the workflow or in the actual process that actually would call for different stage-specific sections of, say, a business case form or a business case document to present itself. Early on, when it's just an idea, there may be only a certain subset of information that you might want to communicate the idea and put the request in for further investigation. As you go through different stages, through maybe the more proposal business case stage and the true evaluation of whether or not we want to accept it as a proposed candidate, you may have increasing levels of information that may be requested or needed to justify whether or not this is a good candidate for us to embark upon as a project. So these types of forms are things that will capture the data that we want to capture so we can actually measure these projects in relation to one another. Another key piece is how do we objectively rank or score these projects? This can vary from organization to organization, but you may have things like different business drivers and different criteria, such as strategic alignment. How well does the project that's being proposed strategically align with one of potentially several stated business objectives or drivers? Will it reduce costs? And if it will reduce costs, to what degree will that happen? Will it help us expand into other markets? Will it improve employee satisfaction? Are there risk factors to us doing these things? Each of these selections or criteria that you put into your process can have, let's just say, a weighted numeric score for those behind each of these selections and each of these rankings, so that you can actually turn, say, something like more of a subjective selection into a numeric score that's weighted depending on the relative importance of each of these drivers or each of these factors. At the end of the day, whatever that scoring mechanism and that weighting is should generate some metrics that you can objectively look at instead of just subjective political want-to type of criteria, whether or not these things really stand on their own 2 feet from a return on investment, from a weighted prioritization score, from a strategic alignment perspective. Is it hitting one of our key business initiatives and those types of things? And using that objective criteria, we can then make better selection and more consistent selection of the right projects and working on the right projects at the right time. I've often used the analogy, you're in a company that makes storage equipment, and somebody comes to you with an idea that, that it would be great if we could make a golf ball that you can drive 500 yards. Well, it's a great idea, but according to the nature and the mission of our business, it's not a good idea for us. So the alignment and the ranking and the return and other factors are key things to make sure it's the right project for us as an organization. In a form like we showed before, and a ranking and a quantification of those rankings and weightings of those scores, things that are commonly used in metrics to consider are things like this. Will it bring additional revenue to the business? Will the project or piece of work do that? Will it bring quality improvement to the business? Will it help us expand into new markets? Will it generate cost reductions? Will it help us expand our current customer base or market share? Will it reduce risks to the business? Will it reduce time to market or cycle times? Do we have the right resources with the right skill sets available? Will it increase overall customer satisfaction of our customer base? Will it increase employee satisfaction? And from a financial perspective, will it provide a return on investment? Will it change net present value? Will it provide some net present value in addition to what we already have in the organization? And will it increase our internal rate of return, other financial metrics that we might have? These are all things that you might look at individually and try to boil them together into a common score for our projects to see how important or how promising this project idea may be. Once we capture all those metrics, we really then would practice the portfolio management aspect of these things, that second note on that big picture diagram I showed you at the outset. It's really PPM, or project portfolio management, is a continuous cycle that includes identification and selection on an ongoing basis. That includes things like alignment and key performance drivers and strategic objectives. And the idea here is to choose the right projects by analyzing what are the right projects, and then also analyzing them against constraints in our capacity, whether they be costs or resources, etc. And then identifying the optimal selection or possibly even sequencing of those things so that we can get as many of those things done to return the best return on investment for our investment in these projects. So the portfolio evaluation and selection is really about the capture and determining the right mix and sequencing of proposed projects. And depending on the nature and the type of metrics you wanted to capture around these proposed projects, we can then look at these things and do consistent evaluation in relation to those. And there's all types of reports and metrics that you can use. In portfolio management and demand management, the bubble chart is always very popular because you can really compare multiple factors. This one here might be something like strategic alignment versus risk, for example, or corporate strategy versus its weighted rating. And then the size of the bubble may be the size of the net present value, and the colors may represent things like the nature and the type of project it is, so we can get the right mix. The key is we can get a very good picture with a lot of dimensions in charts like this and other reports that help us evaluate the projects in the way that make the most sense to us. We can also use other portfolio analytic tools, because once we have a mix of active and proposed projects into a database or into a solution of some type, we can leverage those tools to maybe do more crunching on this so that we can make better decisions on which are the right projects based upon the metrics that we generated. And we can get real-time insight into things like heat maps like you see here of what it's going to take so that we can do modeling and determine where we may be over or under budget or over or under resource capacity, etc. And then we can gather and analyze and prioritize and track all the project demands and then make intelligent selection but have some control over the nature by which we actually are deselecting things or moving projects out. At the end of the day, whatever portfolio management metrics you choose to use, you can actually look at them in the aggregate and make the trade-offs that you want. A key component of what we're looking at from a prioritization of demand is the resource dimension of all this. Do we have the ability to provide resources and the right resources at the right time to get those done? Obviously, human resources is one of our most valuable resources in any organization. And understanding which projects and what types of work are consuming or asking for the utilization of those resources, and aligning our resources with the right projects, and also being able to adjust them based on changing priorities is something that's a very important aspect of being able to deliver. We could actually have a very, let's just say, optimized portfolio from a return on investment perspective, from a market-driven perspective, et cetera, but if we don't have the resources that can deliver on that plan or on that portfolio, we are either going to not deliver on some or all of that portfolio, or we may deliver with less than the desired quality that we might want to have. So one dimension of this is we want to do resource capacity planning in a way to help us prioritize the demand. So if we actually do even high-level resource capacity planning, to maybe do even just role-based, hours-based, or FTE-based plans for all of the candidate projects as well as our active projects, we can start looking at, with good tools, looking at the resource capacity versus the demand, and look at what we have to deliver to these projects and what skill set mixes that we have, and can we deliver those? And is it reasonable for us to do the projects? Can we go out and get other headcount? Can we contract other trade-offs? But the idea to do that demand prioritization and optimization, we have to have a good understanding of the resource capacity planning dimension of this. So from a capacity planning perspective, to get those types of graphs and to look at the metrics in the aggregate, we have to build up and build these plans on a portfolio item by portfolio item basis. In this diagram, we're actually looking at building a capacity plan based upon a proposed project that's in here. And it could be done either through role-based, hours, time-phased, FTE-based, at a high level, long before you have anything even like a task-based schedule. Be able to come in here and say, this is the resources we're going to require of this type and in this quantity over these periods of time in order to get this particular project candidate done. When you look at this in the aggregate across all of the projects that we're considering, we can start looking at what it would take to do all those projects if we chose to do them all, and then maybe try to pare that down based on priorities to get down to the level of resource that we can actually deliver to those project mixes. So then we can do other slices through this. For example, look at whether or not individual resources or specific roles of resource or certain departments of resources are overloaded based upon a portfolio that we're considering, and whether or not we have the wherewithal to increase that capacity, or do we have to whittle down demand. We can eventually take that role-based, those requirements, and actually turn them into named assignments with specific people so that we can actually, instead of in general saying, I have enough DBAs, I have enough hardware engineers, whatever it might be, I can look and see whether or not I have specific individuals with the right skill sets to fill those things. So I can even take it to the next basis to see if we realistically, from a feasibility perspective, have the ability to deliver the right resources at the right time. And then we can have all kinds of real-time resource reporting if we do this centrally, so that we can start looking at what this really means based upon the current data sets that we're working with. Another dimension in prioritizing your demand is the financial aspects, the economics, your budgets. And there's more pressure than ever to maximize return on investment and other financial metrics. So not only do we want to do the things that provide the most benefit and most return to the organization, we also have to do things within the constraints of the budgets that we have and the dollars that we have to apply to these projects. So for example, the return that we get and the cost outlays are two financial aspects that need to be considered when deciding on a portfolio and prioritizing and optimizing your demand. So from a portfolio financial planning perspective, we want to be able to build detailed line item budgets and financial plans so that based upon different categories of costs, whether they be labor, whether they be materials, contracts, travel, travel and living, Those types of things for our projects need to be factored in so we understand what the cost or what the ask is going to be in order to deliver on this project. We want to be able to have cost categories that make the most sense to our organization, and that should be flexible. But on the other hand, we should probably also be able to look at, from the same perspective, what the benefits are. Can we enumerate and quantify the benefits we expect to receive from doing this project? And at what point should we expect to be seeing these returns, whether they be increased revenue, whether they be savings from cost reductions, whatever they might be. And also potentially be able to track actuals and see what we're really spending against this project should we decide to do it. The key is that financial planning is going to give us good insight into what we can deliver from a monetary perspective. And just like we did with the resources, to do this cost planning, you would do it on a portfolio item by portfolio item basis. So by building these detailed cost plans and benefits projections on a portfolio item by portfolio item basis, you can then start looking at things in the aggregate through dashboards and reporting. So we can look at what this means should we do all these things. What is the ask? What will it cost us out of our budget? And when would we expect these returns and benefits to come in? It's also very helpful that when we choose on a portfolio, and part of that is the active projects that we're currently working on, active work that we have, it's also good to be able to look at, are these projects actually running like we thought from a resource or from a cost perspective. In this case, in a cost perspective, a project that you thought was going to cost you so much over a certain period of time could be costing you significantly more, significantly less. And perhaps if you have a project that's running behind that's going way over budget, it might be a candidate in your evaluation of prioritizing new demand. Is it a project that we should kill or suspend in order to bring something in that's more promising, maybe more doable, and more profitable for the organization? So when we start putting in our requests, proposals, our business cases, the metrics for our portfolio analytics, the resource dimension, the cost dimension, and any other metrics that are important to your organization, we can then start using all of that data in what we would call what-if modeling. And this really helps us evaluate alternatives. The idea is to be able to do the selection of the right work to create the most profitable portfolio, and this what-if modeling allows us to evaluate scenarios in an interactive and flexible way given the data we've already entered into the system. So hopefully this what-if modeling will create good metrics and a visual representation of the different business models and the impact they would have on your overall portfolio. One thing you may want to do is set resource and financial targets, meaning what are our constraints? Do we have a headcount plan that we want to evaluate our potential portfolio against so that we can see how this proposed portfolio compares with what we really have to offer? Do we have a budget that this is what, say, a budget that we have to limit ourselves or constrain ourselves by? And will this portfolio cause us to exceed that? And by establishing those targets, we have baselines or metrics or targets that we can compare our proposals against and see how we can fit within those or possibly even justify increases in those capacities. So we can then do what-if resource modeling. So for example, as we built those individual resource plans and resource capacity plans on these different portfolio item bases, we can pull all of these projects into a what-if modeling scenario and say, what if we did all these? What would that mean? And if we do it in relation to a target, we can actually look at, for example, if you look at the bottom pane of that graphic, we can see from a headcount basis, and here we're looking at it on an FTE basis, full-time equivalent basis, where are we exceeding our capacities in these different roles or different types of resources that we have? And can we resolve those things by either deselecting lower priority projects, or could we relieve these constraints by possibly staging the projects and slipping projects out to a later start date or time to time phase this out and push it out so that we can accommodate these with the resources that we have? Well, what are the gaps, and could we contract or hire more in order to get those things done if we wanted to get the entire portfolio done? The key is these things are all interactive modeling scenarios, and these scenarios can be saved so that you can compare different scenarios or alternatives and come up with the one that best meets the needs of the organization. Same on the financial side, same concepts, but if we're comparing against dollar budgets that we have and there are costs for these projects that are required to justify these projects and to complete these projects successfully, we'd want to do the same constraint against that budget and see where this portfolio might cause us to exceed our budget and to what degree. And the color coding below would actually indicate where those things would be exceeded at those points in time. And we can do the same trimming of that portfolio or sequencing of that portfolio to get it to a place where we can actually have something that we can actually deliver and deliver with quality. So those are some of the concepts regarding things to factor in when you're trying to prioritize the demand that comes in the work intake. So with that, let me go and show you some examples live. Here I might be looking at a portfolio that has a combination of projects in different life cycle stages. For example, as I mentioned early on, you may have things that just get nominated and are in an early stage just to get them on the radar so people can decide whether or not it's feasible for us to even pursue even further. It may then go and get the data that's needed from there to actually go and put it into more of a selection phase where we're going to evaluate whether or not we even want to make it a candidate for an active project. And then perhaps we get it through a gate like that and put it into something like a plan stage, where you would then flush out the plan and get it ready for execution should we decide to actually flip the switch and say, okay, we're going to actively pursue this and manage this project. And then maybe some active projects that we're managing. The key is that we can manage a portfolio like this with a combination of intake, proposed ideas, things in different stages of readiness or approval, so that we can look at the portfolio in a total entity. And these can include projects, programs, more operational type of efforts or initiatives, those types of things that make the most sense. So for example, early on in a create stage, I might have a form for this project that has a more limited set of information, things that just to get it on here, the bare minimums that we need to say this is what they are, this is how they're categorized, this is the description, the benefits. And early on in the life cycle stage, would you please consider doing this? And this can vary as far as the level of rigor and detail that you want. Also, documents can actually be associated with that as well. As we go through additional later stages, if we're, say, in something like the planning stage, you might see that the form then actually has gone through different stages, and that form has now expanded to include other information, and planning information, financial information, and assessment information that actually will give us a better total picture of this project and what it may potentially contribute or what the different risks might be in order to do that, and lead to an overall prioritization score that's weighted based upon the parameters that you have. The key is you want something that's flexible that can gather the metrics and the assessment information that you want regarding the projects that are important to you as an organization. Anything that you're evaluating or doing formulas on in a spreadsheet today or individual spreadsheets can readily be put into a system like this where you can actually do those calculations but have them in the context of an entire portfolio that can then actually be promoted into active projects that are managed and then executed and tracked against those justification parameters without having to have separate distinct artifact systems or spreadsheets, etc. The key is when we get those pieces of information we want into our portfolio, we can start looking at our portfolio in a number of different ways. For example, if I wanted to look at this now portfolio that we're considering with the active stuff, let's just say I wanted to focus on the prioritization scores for this portfolio. I can actually go in here and start looking and seeing that there were scores in each of these different sub-areas that were ranked on each of these projects. And I have my weighted prioritization score that I can rank these projects by. And when push comes to shove and I want to select projects or even deselect projects, I can use those criteria to determine what criteria makes the most sense for me to make a selection of what the next project I may have to just postpone or abandon at that point in time. I can start looking at how these things are aligned with our business initiatives or our strategies, so that I can see how well we're aligning with these types of things and other metrics. Anything we're capturing, and this can be modified to things that you're already doing, but maybe not in as much of an automated fashion in a central system, to capture those metrics and get them all in place for you. Now with that, each of these portfolio items can actually have other dimensions here other than the scoring metrics. For example, we talked about capacity planning. By selecting a portfolio item and actually putting a resource capacity plan set of information in here, we can add requirements. They could either be just generic roles, they could be named individuals if that's something that's important to you at this stage of the process. But the idea, you can do planning on either a full-time equivalent FTE or hours basis, et cetera, whatever makes the most sense. But the key is I can get some quantification of the resource ask, the things that people want to know when you're trying to get a project approved. What's it going to cost me? What's the resource commitment that's going to be needed? You know, what's the schedule? When can I have it? When do I need to start these things? Those are the quantifications, the types of things, of questions people want to know. What's going to be the financial benefit to the company of doing this? In this case, we're saying the ask on this project is not very long. I need a business analyst half-time for a 2-month period and a project manager for 2 months over a period, or whatever other resources that I have. And at some point, I can get into here and I could actually determine at some point, for example, if I need to actually select an actual project manager, I could do matches to figure out who might be available or who might be good candidates to do these things. So we would do that for each and every project, or each candidate project as it comes on through. Same thing holds true with cost planning. Depending on where you're at or in the cycle, you can then build budgets and cost plans on a very detailed line item basis to help justify the project. In this case, we're looking at a budget that's broken down by labor categories, and those are built up from either hours or FTEs times a rate, and then gives you a dollar value. And also some hard dollar categories, things like other or materials that can be just put dollar values in here. The key is on this time-phased budget, it's all going to be line item detail justification to roll up to a total cost or a total budget for this project. So that what might be considered a swag when you look at this total number can then be go back and justified and evaluated on how it was built up from a very rational detail perspective. We can also do the same things with other cost types. We've got the cost categories here, but the cost type here, this might be your budget. You might, when this thing goes active, start tracking actual costs against these same categories to see if we're tracking to what we thought. We can also have categories here on things like benefits and when we're going to look at seeing returns, maybe what these revised forecasts might be, et cetera. The key is that detailed budgeting on the prioritization and the benefits are two of the key things that are going to be there when you're justifying and prioritizing demand. Now, if you come into here and you want to start looking at all this from a what-if perspective, we've got our parameters in for all these projects in the business case. We've got our resource capacity plan for each of them. We've got our cost plans and budgets for each of them. What if we want to evaluate this portfolio in total? So, for example, if I select all the items in this portfolio, and this could be as narrow or as broad a selection as you want it to be, we can then go into our modeler. And the modeler will actually bring in all of the projects that we selected. It will show us a timeline for those projects based upon the schedule that was put in place. It will also bring in the data that we choose to have in the view, so things like the alignment, the business initiatives, the life cycle stage they're in, the project types, the ROI, the prioritization scores are all things that can be evaluated and sorted by in here so that we can actually make very measured judgments and assessments of what are the right projects to work on. We can also overlay on these things targets. So down below, if I have different targets that were set up like my current budget plan, or I might have different targets that might say, what if I increase headcount 10%? What if I increase my budget 5%? What would those things be? I can have different targets to overlay on this. But if I apply that target, notice down below that that target now gets put in relation to what this portfolio would need as far as dollars in this case, and it says here that it shows me in the red where I'd be overspending on those types of things. I could also look at this not just from a dollar perspective, I could say look at it from a resource perspective. And I can start looking at saying to do all these projects here on an FTE basis, I'm looking at what categories of resource and see where I'm over allocated. These are real constraints that if I can't find a way to deliver on those resources, I will not be able to deliver in an effective and quality way this entire portfolio. So from this demand perspective, what I may want to do is a few things. I might want to evaluate a scenario where I start maybe deselecting projects. And that might relieve my overallocation. I might start deselect different projects of a lower priority. Or maybe I use a combination of deselecting projects based upon their priority or other parameters, and then I start moving some projects to later dates to see if I can relieve some of this. And the idea, the combination of these types of scenarios will help me get to a portfolio that is either doable or at least close within a stretch for us to be able to deliver on. And as we do this, we're not really affecting the core data. This is actually rendering to us in a scenario type of mode, a what-if mode. And we can actually copy versions of this so that we can actually compare versions and do different scenarios that we can present to our management. Or we can do this as an exercise with a governance or a steering committee to really arrive at a well-thought-out portfolio that factors in a lot of considerations to make sure that we're working on the right work with the best return and working on it at the right time. So from this perspective, also realize that we can have different types of work in a solution like this. In Portfolio Engine here from EPM Live, for example, you may have projects in your portfolio. You might have agile work that has backlog items and things like that. You may have operational work. There can be all different types of work that are into the mix. It doesn't have to be traditional projects only in this. The key is you can make this as broad or as narrow a definition of projects and work as you want to within your organization. And the key is if the resources are all being compelled to work on those different types of work, and that work is actually vying for their attention, the more you have a multiplicity of types of work in here that are putting demands and strains on our resources, the better picture and the more effective you're going to be able to use your resources against all that work. If you like what you've seen today, you can take a look at the software that I was showing you today by requesting a free trial. You go to epmlive.com and ask for a trial of Portfolio Engine, which is really our tool that has the capabilities that we're showing you here today in this regard, as well as others. If you go to our website at epmlive.com, you can actually request a free trial on our website, and you will get access to a demo environment that you can actually go in and get hands-on with, that you can actually go through and put it through its paces and run through some scenarios of your own as you want to go on through. Hopefully what we've shown you is some techniques and things to consider today as you're prioritizing demand in your portfolio of different types of work. Remember, this is the first in a series. We have 3 others coming up. You can go to our website under our resources and under our webinars area, and you can register for those. For those of you that can't make the specific time, we do record these, and if you do register, we'll make sure that you get a link to the recording if for some reason you have a conflict and end up not being able to make the webinar. But hopefully you found this helpful today. We find that this method and these tool sets do help organizations get a handle on a very complex issue of managing multiple projects and large portfolios and large numbers of resources. And we hope that you pick some things you might be able to apply today within your organization. Thank you very much again, and hope to see you at our next webinar.